Another beautiful day. Nice and sunny here in Sydney, Australia. Budgies chirping in the background. They're not native, they're the neighbours. Righto, what are we going to do today? Put the radiator in the International. Well, actually, let's start putting the radiator in the International. I'm happy enough with the position that the panels are in now. Where are we? They look pretty good. They're close enough that I can start making up a mounting system for them. So let's do that. Let's see what I'm going to do. So I've just got it sitting in there at the moment. It's a 4-core aluminium radiator for a HQJXZ Holden V8. So I got it because, like everything I'm trying to do on this build, I'm trying to make it so that if anything goes wrong, I can just go and get a radiator hose straight off the counter at my local parts store. Or if a radiator fails, I can just get a replacement radiator and put it in, because it's designed to fit the chassis, it's designed to fit the engine and so on. All I'm really adapting it to is the actual body that's going on here. So a couple of things need to be aware of, and that's that whenever you're mounting a radiator, the cap or the top hose needs to be the highest point of the cooling system. It needs to be higher than everything else. Now, people have fallen into this mistake before where they've mounted their radiator lower and you can't bleed the air out of it. You end up with an airlock and you end up with overheating issues. So we're going to avoid that. Where the radiator is sitting at the moment, I've left it wrapped in the bubble wrap, and then when I'm playing around with it, installing it, I'm going to put cardboard over the fins as well so I don't damage it on the fan and so on, dragging it in and out. But what I'm going to do is, where it's sitting at the moment, I've had the bonnet sitting on the car and there's clearance, it's all good. So far it's looking pretty good. I've actually got it sitting on a bar that goes across the front of the radiator support, front of the grille. I'll show you on this one. So this bar across here, I've actually got the radiator sitting on top of that at the moment. So that's a good reference height, seems to work. As I said, the radiator's higher than the engine. I could probably put it down a little bit lower if I needed to. But what I'm trying to work out at the moment is how I'm going to mount it. Now what I also want to do, what I need to do, is that hole down there in the chassis, that round hole, and there's also one on this side, down here, just there. That's actually the original radiator support mounting points on the Holden chassis. So I'm going to pick those up. There's going to be rubber mounts sitting on top of those holes, and then I'm going to build a frame that goes across from chassis rail to chassis rail, and that's what I'm going to mount my radiator to. But also, that frame that I'm going to build is going to hold up all of the front metal work of all of the mud guards, the grille, inner guards and everything. So once again, looking back at this, I'm going to use these mounting points because these grills are a structural element of the front of these cars. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to run across from the chassis rail from side to side, and I'm going to pick up this with some sort of bracketry so that the chassis rail is holding up, the chassis rails are holding up the radiator support and grille, and the whole lot becomes one unit. I'll make it so that it bolts in and out, and I'll make it so the radiator bolts in and out, so it's all completely serviceable. So I'm going to pop this radiator out in a moment and we'll have a look at what's the best way to go about making that. Let's do that. As I've mentioned a bunch of times, I'm trying to use as many Holden parts as I can on this. So in the name of that, I got this kit from Rare Spares, and if you're in Australia, you'll know of Rare Spares. It's a body mount kit for a HQJXZ WB 1-tonner with the bolts included. So I used this kit for the mounts to mount the subframe that I made, and I will show you a video on that. The subframe that I made. So this is the subframe that I made, and below there is one of the mounts that I got. That's an original Holden mount. And then in the front here, put a bit of light on the subject. That's the subframe that I made. That's the original mount that I've used with the bolts. Now the reason I bought the kit with the bolts is that way I didn't have to go chasing them. They're brand new high tensile bolts specifically designed for that purpose, correct length and all the rest of it, so why make life difficult for myself? So this particular mount just here, it is for the radiator support. So I believe that the way that it works is that, how about I show you on the car? So that's half of the mount sitting on top of the chassis rail, and then let's pretend this piece of cardboard is part of the radiator support. Then it would sit on top of that mount, and it would have a hole in it the same size as the smaller, this part of rubber here, and it would come up, and then this part, the other part of the mount, would sit on top of that. So I'll pour it. So what we have is the large part on the bottom there, it sits on top of the chassis rail. Then where the metal sleeve is, the crush tube in the middle, that area goes through the radiator support mounting bracket, and then the rubber comes on the top, the other rubber comes on the top, and they come together like that. And what it means is that the radiator support and the front body mounts are rubber mounted, so it's not going to snap and it's not going to cause undue vibrations and so on. So I'm going to use that exact same mounting system to mount what I'm fabricating. Okay, so I've been in the design workshop here, and I've been taking some measurements. Got measurements 680mm from mounting hole to mounting hole. I know that the radiator is 75mm thick. I know that it is 480mm high. It's 710mm wide from outer edge to outer edge. All these measurements not really going to mean anything to you. What I've got, I was going to make all new mounts and so on. I have this original radiator mount. Now the radiator, this is from the International, the radiator doesn't fit into that, but what it does do is I've got it clamped to the back of the grill here at the moment. So this is the back of the grill, this is the radiator support. I've got it clamped there. What I'm thinking of doing is putting a plate that goes from this to this, removable with bolts, maybe weld it to one and bolt to the other or something, so that this radiator support holds up the grill. Now as it is at the moment, the grill is holding up the radiator support, but the grill is also held up by bricks at the moment. So if I was to take the bricks out and bits of timber, it'd just drop down. So what I need is something to hold it up. So what I've got, this is the Holden radiator support mounting points. I've got the bushes sitting there, and I've just got a piece of cardboard there that's mimicking some sort of steel plate, and I've got the same on the other side. And what I'm looking at doing, I'll change positions here. What I'm looking at doing is making something that goes where that piece of cardboard is, that goes from there and mounts across to the radiator support, and making it so that it's one piece from the cardboard plate across to the radiator support, and then the same on the other side, and then I can bolt this radiator support piece to the chassis on rubber mounts, so therefore it'll be nice and solid and strong. So that means that all of the weight of that radiator support will be bared down on the rubber bushes onto the chassis. Means that it will now be load bearing. Once it's load bearing, if I attach the grille via that plate that I put between the grille and the radiator support, then it means that the load bearing radiator support will then hold the grille up. The grille holds the mud guards up and all the rest of it. So what I can do is kill two birds with one stone, which is what I'd hoped to do, and that is that I can use the radiator support to mount the radiator to, and I can use the radiator support to make sure that the grille stays up. Now, one thing that I do have to do is the radiator support is currently about, I can't remember, 40 or 50 mil narrower than my radiator mounting points. So I think it must be about 630 mil, the radiator support, and my grille is about, my radiator is about 680 mil. So what I intend to do is cut and shut it. So I will cut it in half, about where the circle is in the middle, move it out, and then once I've got it to the right width, then I'll fabricate the brackets, the plates from the rubber bushes to mount to the radiator support to hold it all in place. And I'll need some gusseting, some other bracing and so on, but I'm pretty confident that will work. And conveniently, the position of it is the distance that I believe that I need from the from the fan, I should say. So this spirit level here, from this point here to the top front of the fan, is about 110 millimeters, and the radiator itself is 75 mil thick, which gives me about a 35 mil gap between the radiator and the fan, which once I put a cowl on, I think that'll be pretty much the perfect distance. So a lot of measurements and so on to get that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the radiator support out. I'm going to work out the height that I want the radiator to bolt to it, as in how high I want it up and down, because the radiator will actually need to sit slightly lower than the radiator support to center it to the fan. So I'm going to take the radiator support out, I'm going to cut it, modify it, whilst having it bolted to the radiator, and I'll tack it back in place so that it's made to fit the radiator. Then once I've got those two items nicely connected, then I'll pop it all back in place somehow, and then I'll fabricate the brackets up that hold it in place. Let's see how all that goes, eh? I've been backwards and forwards between thought processes, as you do with this sort of thing. I like the idea of using this radiator support, the one that's below here, so I'm going to. So what I've got worked out is that the masking tape here, that is actually, I did that while the radiator support was clamped in the car, and I've worked out this is the height that I need the top of the radiator to be at, and that will mean that the fan will be centered to the radiator. I may cut all this stuff off the top, or I may leave it there. I'll worry about that at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'll mount the radiator to the face of this radiator support here. And as I said, the bottom of the radiator support here, I'm going to put a plate that'll go back towards the grille, and it'll either be bolted or welded on here, and then it'll attach to the grille, and that'll hold the grille up. Now on the other side here, the radiator is overhanging about 60 millimeters. Now, when I say I was between thoughts, what I did consider was actually just overhanging the radiator by about 30 mil on either side. So let's say that's 30 mil on either side, and then just mounting some brackets, welding some brackets off the radiator support out, off the radiator support out, and fixing it there. And that way I wouldn't have to cut and shut this or do anything fancy like that. And I did consider that. I thought, well, that is the easy way to go. I could literally get some angle iron, put it there, and job done. The reason I'm not doing that, though, is that the distance that the radiator is from the fan is about as close as I would like it to be. Now, by having this sit like this, what I find is that there is air gap that's created by the welds from the radiator and so on that pushes it out from the radiator support. So I'm not going to mount it that way. I'm going to widen it out so that I can get this as close as I can to here. And I'll just have to notch out a little bit of the support on the bottom here just to clearance it a bit. And I believe it'll just give me about 10 mil of extra space between the radiator and the fan. I have had fans go through radiators before, so I'm a little bit cautious of it. So I'm going to go to the extra effort to widen the radiator support to gain that 10 mil. We'll see. This may be what I end up using. I hope it is, but it's not unheard of to go through and make something and realise that, yeah, I could have done it better, so I will. Let's see what happens. I've temporarily braced this just with a big bit of plate, 10 mil plate there, just welded it across the bottom, and that's something like what the plate that goes across the bottom will look like in the long run, but it won't be quite as wide. And yeah, I've just got that there just to hold the distance apart, so I've widened it this much, so about 60 mil. There you can see there, that's how much I've widened it. So what I'm going to do now is just clean this up through here. Nothing will be sitting in the bottom of this, so I'm not limited by space. So I'm going to clean this up, and I'm actually going to put a nice thick bit of plate, whatever I can find around, from here across to here. Clean all this up. I'll bang some of these dents out, and I'll weld that in there, and that'll put a lot of strength back in there. And I will go through and put something in here afterwards later, just to fill in the hole. But then, as I said, underneath there'll be another plate that goes across that will then pick up the radiator support. What I'm trying to do is make it so that this thing is really strong, because it's actually going to be holding the front panels of the car on. So let's go. Okay, so what you saw me do then was weld some steel bar in across the base there to strengthen it up. Now this is what I had. It was just some old pieces of steel I had lying around. As I've said previously, if I see steel I pick it up, so these were just some offcuts from something or other. I needed something that was about that wide, so I think it was 50 something mil wide. These were 30 mil wide, so I just cut off a thin strip off the back of one of these to make it the right width. I'm running short on scrap metal lying around the place, so I'm sort of fabricating out of what I've got. So what I did, I put those across there. Most of the welds are okay. I did have some contamination in this spot here for some reason. Everything else was good, but this was just popping and crackling. But there's heaps of strength in there. So that's fillet welded around here, just stitched through here, and then it's welded across the end there. So I've been beating the life out of it. I did discover a rust hole. I'm not in the slightest bit concerned about it. This is all pretty thick steel. And there'll be another plate across there. Again, I will treat this, paint it, and do all that sort of stuff later on, but at the moment I'm just making it. So what I have, I needed it to be 710 millimeters wide. So I have made it 710 millimeters wide. It's actually about 709 mil. It's a bit hard from where you are. And what I have found is that this, I had to cut this bar through the middle. I don't know whether I'll leave it there in the long run, but I probably will. So when I cut that, it sprung in at the top. So at the moment, it's only about 695 mil. So all I've done, I've just stuck this piece of RSJ in here and this clamp, these quick grip clamps. And you can spin them around so they work backwards. So I just took this head off and spun it around. It would normally be on this end. And now when I pump the lever, it's actually pushing out rather than pulling in. So all I'm doing is pumping that out until I achieve the 710 mil, which I'm nearly there, probably one more pump, and that way, just a little one, and that way I will have the desired width. Yep, so 710. Oh, fingers in the way there. 710, and the 710 is the measurement. It's not on the top here, but on the bottom, it's the measurement that I've got that I need from bracket to bracket. So what I'm going to do is I'll just join that. I've got a piece of round bar here somewhere. Yep. So I've got this piece of round bar. It's the same size. So I'll just cut a piece that length there, weld it in, and it'll do the job. And if it stays there forever, great. And if it doesn't, well, I'll cut it out, but at least it served its purpose in the moment, for the moment. Once I've got that there, then I've got the radiator support widened out to what I need, and then I'll play around with making a plate, and I'll probably use this bit of plate, bigger plate across the bottom that picks up the bottom of the actual grill. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I've got that bar done. Got that bar just there done, so that's sort of pretty seamless. Let's pop the radiator on top. I put this masking tape here. This is my reference points. So I don't have to keep measuring. I've just got a straight line through here between those two bits of tape, two bits of masking tape there and there. Move it across. Okay, so what I have is that this is perfectly flush on the side here and on this side. That's the height that I need the radiator at. This is the top. So now what I'll do is I won't be able to use this hole. You can't see it. I won't be able to use the lower hole, the lower mounting hole down here. Where are we? won't be able to use this hole down here because it misses. So I can drill some more holes. So I'll drill one here. I've got this one to work with. I've got the same on the other side. So what I'll do is I'll drill some holes through there, and then I'll get some bolts, and I believe I will have enough room to be able to just get a bolt, push it through, and have it so that it's actually sticking forward. Actually, no, I might do it the other way. I'll have the bolt coming through the face, and I'll weld a nut on the back, so that when I want to take the radiator off or put it on, all I have to do is line it up, put bolts in, and away I go. I may even put just a locating dowel, just something I can sit on, so I'm not trying to struggle with it and hold it in place. So we'll have a look at that. Okay, so I've gone ahead and drilled some holes in here. They're about 10mm holes, and put these bolts through with some nuts. So I just have a box of these 5/16 bolts with nuts on standby. I use them for a lot of things. So I got one on one side, one on the other side. I'll just double check that my heights are right. So yeah, top of that piece of tape there, and maybe a mil low on that one, but that's okay. I got a little bit of adjustment in this. So I also went ahead and I worked out where I wanted to put the bottom bolt. So I just drew a pilot hole, drilled a pilot hole just here, and the same over this side. So I'll just get this true to where I want it. So I'll lift it up at a mil on this side. Once I've got it, then I'll transfer this pilot hole through onto the radiator support. Might have to try, not sure exactly how. I'll probably get a scribe in there or something and just sort of try and scratch a line in there. And then I'll drill the holes through. I'll drill a hole large enough for a bolt. I intentionally just left it as a pilot hole at the moment, so that when I do scratch a mark through there, then it's a very accurate mark. If I did the full size hole, the 10mm hole, then it's a bit less accurate. So I'll drill that, get it in. But this is what it's looking like so far. So that's actually bolted to the support. So that's almost ready to pop into the car, to then start fabricating the mounts that come off from here across to the chassis mounts. And then I can also fabricate the plate that comes off the bottom of the radiator support that goes to pick up the grille. Making progress. Got the 4 bolt holes done. So this one, this one, this one, and this one. This was original points from when it was an international. I could have picked those up, but I figured there's no point trying to re-drill the holes for those. So what I've done here, I've got this nut and this nut ready to go. I've double nutted them. So what I mean by that is I put the bolt with a nut coming through, and the reason being, I don't want the bolt sticking out the back of this in case I get some splatter on it and I can't get it back out. So I'm just going to tack weld this in place so that it ends up as a captured nut like this, so that when I want to put the radiator in and out, it's easy. So yeah, the only reason I've double nutted is so the bolt doesn't come out, so I don't get welding splatter on the back, because I'll damage the thread trying to get it back out again. Once I've done this one, I'll take these ones out, the top ones, I'll clean up the metal on the radiator support, and I'll do the same up there. So we have 4 captive nuts welded on there, bit of bracing and so on. So I think these are cooled down. So yeah, these just come in and out. The nut does nothing, that one there does nothing. It's just to protect the bolt, so we get rid of that nut. Yeah, left-handed. Put the bolt in here. I will of course have a washer on this when I do it, but now you can see the bolt will come right the way through. Don't have to try and hold nuts and bolts and things when I'm putting this all together. Then it'll just be a matter of tightening it up, and away we go. Now on this, there is a couple of points down here where the radiator is contacting the frame, or more over here. I'll just put some rubber insulation in between there, because I don't want the radiator rubbing, not that it should be moving, but I don't want the radiator rubbing against the metal and wearing a hole through the tank. So I will have some insulation through there on the final installation. So yeah, that's that. Now this thing's ready to carry over to the front of the International and to start fabricating how to install it. So an hour or so later, been into the fabrication. So what I ended up having to do was cut off the back flange of this original radiator support, and I did that to clearance about 10 mil or so, because I was concerned that the radiator was going to sit too close to the fan. So that is what it is. So it sits back. I've got this steel through here, these thick pieces, 6 mil or whatever it is through here, all welded in. There'll be more welding. It's all pretty ugly at the moment, but it'll all be held together. And then I have partially welded in this plate here, and it goes right the way through to the back, to the front, whatever. So it's a good solid bit of steel. Again, lots of ugliness going on in there, all sorts of contaminants in between the layers, but I'll box it and make it good. I'm just fabricating at the moment. So I've drilled 4 holes here. They line up with the holes in the bottom of the radiator support. Bottom of the grill, I should say. So this radiator support will go in. Again, it'll be mounted across to the chassis on each side. And then the grill will sit on top of this. So this will hold the grill in place. So this goes underneath the grill. The grill sits there. And then what I'm going to do is put this plate on top to sandwich the grill between the lower plate and the upper plate, so that it disperses the load of the 4 bolts that are going to be in place, just to spread it, give it a bit more strength. So what I'm doing at the moment, I drilled these pilot holes based on location. So those 4 pilot holes I was talking about a moment ago are based on those 4 holes there. So that plate goes underneath this, and then this one will sit on top. Bolts will go through this, through the radiator support, and through that big thick flange that I put on the bottom, through the grill and through the radiator support, and it'll all be clamped together. So the radiator support will be mounted there, and then it will hold this up. Okay, so it's taken a while, dragged out just about every tool I own, but we've got the radiator mount in place. So you can see I put that plate down there, had to shape it around a few things there, couldn't get the bolts to line up, but it now does, and it is solid. I can lift the whole front of the vehicle up with this. So it comes up here. I think it's roughly in the position it would have been in factory, but it's now wider. So what I'm making at the moment, I've just made some cardboard templates, and this is one of them here. It's a bit hard to show you, but that's going to mount onto the rubber mount, and that's the rubber mount in the middle, which goes to the point on the chassis. I've got to bring it out this way about 10 mil more, and 10 mil forward. Maybe not the forward, I don't necessarily need to do that. So yeah, the 10 mil there is to fill the gap just there. Rather than make a new template, I'm just going to make it out of metal from this point. So that'll come across there, and then I'm going to weld that plate onto the side of the radiator support. I'll trim that corner off there that's not needed, and I'll also put some gusseting underneath it to give it some strength, probably on top actually as well, so that it doesn't sag. So I'm just going to make that. It's going to take a little while. Make that out of some umbrella stand, and if you're new, if you haven't seen my previous videos, I made my pedal assembly bracket out of an umbrella stand. Good 6 mil plate. Okay, let's get into that. Voila, one umbrella stand. So I got the template there. I checked, they're pretty much the same from side to side, which is good. So I'll cut 2 of those out, and then I'll drill some holes, and then when I mess it up, I'll do it again. We've got our first bracket tacked into the side of the radiator cradle, radiator support. So it's just sitting on the rubber bush, but the bush is lined up. I'll trim the corners off, so across here I'll trim this off and round it off on the corners and so on to make it all look a bit prettier. But it is tacked on to the bottom of the mount there. As I said, I'll put a gusset in, probably top and bottom on that to give it some strength. and I'm just making the one on the other for the other side. I ended up making a more accurate cardboard template. The other one was a template of a template. So I've just started cutting the hole in this for the mount with my hole saw, a bit of Viper cutting fluid, just to make it so I don't destroy my hole saw. So yeah, going through that. As I said, I will trim the corners and so on up but to make it prettier, but this is what it is at the moment. Well, thanks for watching the first video on the International L110 radiator support construction. That's it, just beside me, just there. This thing just here, wherever it is. It's back out of the truck, as you'll see. It's also missing one brace from the end. I wonder why. Did I make a mess of it? Did I muck up my thought process? Or was it planned? You'll have to watch part 2 to work out whether I'm an idiot or whether it was planned. Or maybe somewhere in between. You make your mind up, I'll make my mind up. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining me on Toxic Garage Customs. I'll see you on the next one.